to admit, I've been trying so hard all week to figure out what exactly Ron DeSantis thinks about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I mean, I know what Ron DeSantis used to think, because before he was a governor and a likely presidential candidate, he was just kind of a run-of-the-mill member of Congress during Russia's invasion of Crimea, which was almost a decade ago. And just like most Republicans at the time, he talked pretty tough about Vladimir Putin and Russia.
Ukraine is a great example. What Vladimir Putin sees is he sees weakness. He sees a president that's not serious, and so he knows he can get away with things there. And I think if we had a policy which was firm, which armed Ukraine with defensive and offensive weapons so that they could defend themselves, I think Putin would make different calculations. And so I think Obama's policy of weakness is actually making a larger conflict more likely. And I think if you had a Reagan-esque policy of strength, I think you'd see people like Putin not want to mess with us.
That's some pretty standard hawkish stuff from then Congressman Ron DeSantis. Nothing too surprising about what he said. So it was a little confusing earlier this month when DeSantis responded to a questionnaire from Tucker Carlson, of course, about Russia's latest invasion of Ukraine by saying this, quote, "While the U.S. has many vital national interests, becoming further entangled in a territorial dispute," that's the key part there, "between Ukraine and Russia is not one of them." A territorial dispute that is not a vital national interest. This is the biggest war in Europe, okay? Definitely singing a different tune, though, there than he was in 2015. Tucker Carlson seemed to approve, and maybe that was the entire point, which shouldn't be a surprise, because he was describing it as a territorial dispute in the same language that Tucker, Donald Trump, and Vladimir Putin, the guy who's overseeing and directing this invasion, by the way, would also use. But there was also a whole lot of backlash from other prominent Republicans, including his fellow Floridian Marco Rubio, who said, "I don't know what he's trying to do. Obviously, he doesn't deal with foreign policy every day as governor. Obviously, he doesn't." And it seemed like all that backlash might have gotten through to him somehow, because in an interview with Piers Morgan, Ron DeSantis took another crack at it.
I think they have the right to that territory. I just think that's the source of the conflict. It's in those regions, which there's likely going to continue to be a lot of conflict on that going forward. So if I could snap my fingers, I'd give it back to Ukraine 100%.
What's your view of Putin?
Look, I think he's got grand ambitions. I think he's hostile to the United States. But I think the thing that we've seen is he doesn't have the conventional capability to realize his ambitions. And so he's basically a gas station with a bunch of nuclear weapons. I think he is a war criminal. This ICC, we have not done that in the United States because we're concerned about our soldiers or people being brought under it. But I do think that he should be held accountable.
Okay. So now Vladimir Putin's a war criminal now who should be held accountable. Okay, definitely stronger language than that written statement to Tucker Carlson. But then, just the day after that interview aired, there was this.
You have Ukraine and Russia fighting over kind of the borderlands there in the far eastern part of Ukraine and over places like Crimea. And my position on that is, I care more about securing our own border in the United States than I do about the Russia-Ukraine border. And it seems like the establishment, some of the people that you mentioned, they ignore the problems that we have here at home as Americans.
Okay, so if you're having a hard time following, you're not alone. But let me try to recap here. It's nothing more than a territorial dispute, but the person overseeing this little territorial dispute is a war criminal. But at the same time, we have to worry much more about our own border than said war criminal. Got it. Okay, I think. And look, I know there are politics involved here. Of course there are. This is a potential presidential primary that he's going to get himself engaged in. But this isn't just about positioning in a Republican primary. The rest of the world actually watches stuff like this very closely, including Vladimir Putin. And if he sees the two leading Republican candidates for president waffling on support for Ukraine, it gives him incentive to wait out the next year and a half and continue to pulverize Ukrainian civilians, rather than even being open to negotiating anything. So Ron DeSantis may think this is just another political issue to manage in a primary, but what he is saying could actually impact the war. Europeans are watching this too, and if they think the United States may waver in their support, that can impact their calculus as well. Look, I was with President Biden on his first overseas trip as president when the most common concern he heard from other foreign leaders was whether they could depend on our commitment to our values and to our partners after 4 years of Donald Trump. How long would it last, was their question. And you better believe that those concerns will resurface if they are sensing a return to the isolationist sentiment from the leading Republican candidates for president. Now, it may be that Ron DeSantis has lurched away from Trump on this issue and is a firm supporter of helping Ukraine. It may be that he's lurched back. I honestly can't tell. But what I do know is this: consistency matters, commitment to values matters, and at the moment, Ron DeSantis isn't showing much of either of those.